Hello again, everyone. Again, my name is Zach here at Z.M.S.C Model Arcs, and welcome to another build video series that we're going to be doing here. So this one, we've kind of already started tackling little bits of it, but essentially what we're building is Eduard's wonderful 148th MiG-21 MF here, but with a little bit of a twist. If you watch the rest of our videos, you'll see that we had recently gone ahead and reviewed the LanceR conversion set for Eduard from Icaerodesign, and I gotta tell you, straight off the bat, this is probably one of the best drop fit resin kits I've ever made and seen. Like, that's just straight off of the mold blocks. There's no sanding away the edge of the sidewalls, no material removal, no fidgeting with the edges for flash, absolutely nothing. This kit is absolutely probably one of the easiest and best detailed resin cockpits I've ever had the pleasure of working with. But anyways, so besides all that, we're straight into the build here. We've basically gone ahead and built up the cockpit just to test fit it. We've got it with some glued together with some microcrystal clear just to hold it in place for the time being, so we can see how everything fits. And then we've kind of taped up the fuselage to see if we needed to do anything, which, well, we don't. So we'll just go ahead and pop this guy out and get you a better look at it. So what I thought was originally going to be a problem with the IP panel, what I ended up doing was keeping it on the mold block while I removed those little dials, and then after that, after I drilled them out, then I went ahead and took it off of the mold block. So that's that guy. What it called out for in the instructions was the removal of the main floor pan here, which you can see there's that's ever so slight divot just ahead of this little round piece right here. That's where all the control sticks and stuff originally went. So it's just that line there, and we separated it. So we're keeping this nose piece here because that's where the landing gear is going to go. So we've built that up. We've sanded that nice and smooth just to make sure it fits with the regular or the resin kit. But everything looks like it's fitting absolutely perfect, which is good. I like perfect. Anyways, so another thing we've also done, now I don't know if you guys are aware of what the LanceR conversion set did for the MiG-21. Basically what it did was it brought it up to NATO standards so it can use the navigation sets of NATO, and it also used several Western technologies inside of it. So one of those being in the armaments section with the Magic, the R550 Magic missile, commonly found on the French fighters and some upgraded Soviets. So what we've done is we've actually taken this out of another kit that we have lying around, and we've got two of these, but the other one we've gone ahead and cast because the other kit still needs its missiles, but I need more of them. So what we've basically done is gone ahead and made a cast copy of it. Now I'm not selling this, so don't get your panties in a bunch. But for this silicone, it's a room temperature vulcanizing silicone from Micromark. It's the relabeled stuff, but for the small amounts that I use it for at this moment, it's absolutely great. And essentially it's a 10-to-1 ratio of part A and part B by weight or volume, they say. You can base it depending on how much you're doing. So this whole bottle is enough for all of that, and it gave us our first half, and then we went ahead and poured in our second half here. So kind of big moment of truth reveal to see how well we came along with it. You can see the two different colors there. All right. A little bit of fidgeting there. I guess some of the silicone had poured out and attached to itself where the release agent wasn't in there, so. And there we go. Here's our missile, our original missile, and that's our two halves. So you can see here where I made some of the guide marks along to be able to fit it into the same spot every single time. So now what we're going to do is cut a channel down here at the end of the mold, so that way the resin can get in and flow around. It doesn't have to be super perfect, but it's the better the mold, the better the cast will be. Let's just see how well that's going to work for us here. We'll widen out the other side as well. Why not? There we go, there's our mold halves all nice and channeled out. So when we do come to making the magic missiles for it, we've got a nice block to work with, and then that way we won't have to go striving around for $40 missiles for no reason. Anyways, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to clean the desk up first so that it's not this huge pile of mess and resin and silicone, and then we'll be coming back and posting these all up for primer, and then shortly thereafter we'll probably have some paint down. We're probably going to use a light blue. Now I've got a particularly nice shade of it here in the form of a Cannes pale blue, and this is for the SU-33, but it's a really nice that's a really nice pale blue that looks to be about the right shade on the inside of the LanceR converted Romanian MiG-21s. So we'll probably go ahead and do that, and then we'll also get get the rest of the gear bays all put together as per the instructions, and get the engines all ready to be primed and then we'll come back when everything's primed and ready to move on. Alright, so we're back from the spray booth now, and we've kind of sprayed our main colors here in on the MiG. So what we've done is gone ahead and sprayed the inside edge of the lip of the canopy, and we've also gone ahead and prior to doing this we sprayed some gloss black, some X1 from Tamiya in there, and then what we came over top of it with was some dark iron from the Mr. Metal color range. And if I can get one of these, so basically what that does is, you can see it gives it sort of a matte type kind of finish already on it. But if we go ahead with something like, say, a cotton bud, and we start rubbing away at it, you can see that we get this nice metal color shining through, which is what we want. We want somewhat of a darker metal. Looking at the references, it's not an aluminum like it gets called out for in the instructions, but it's more of a dark, not so much burnt, but weathered type of metal. So we've done that at the front, we've done that at the back as well, so go ahead and do those. Now if you don't have cotton buds, you can always use just a standard kind of paper towel, or a microfiber cloth that you'd normally get from your eyeglasses or something like that, and you can use those in there as well. And then just to demonstrate what it's really useful for is on sections like these of our engine. Get a new one out. So there's always that little raised bit of detail all the way around the engine, and then what we can kind of do is come in and highlight that just by rubbing away at these buffable paints. And you can see there what happens when we start rubbing away. We get that sort of metallic type finish underneath the raised areas, but everything that's below it stays that kind of dark matte shade, which is good for kind of bringing out the the raised details, and then all that. So you're not going to see much back here, which is why we're not going to spend too much time on it. It's just to kind of get it looking somewhat metallic, and we're going to do that on all the pieces. So this is the nose cone here. This is going to get the kind of that same sort of finish on it. This is just going to get us a base where we want to be. And we're going to clear coat all of those guys. And then what we'll do is go ahead and put an acrylic clear on the rest of them. And then we'll move on to pin washing and adding some highlights to it. So we've got our gear bay primed, and we also went ahead and sprayed up our cockpit here with the Icaerodesign light blue. And that was thin 50-50 with some just normal 99% IPA that I had, just some drugstore stuff. And we're gonna go ahead and paint all the smaller details inside of here before we move on to actually putting down our kind of highlights and pin washes, or we might just do a general gunk wash on there just to kind of bring everything out quickly, because once this is in the cockpit, you know, it's all seated in, it's not really going to be seen as well. So we'll go ahead and get those all painted up, and we'll come back when these are cleared and we're ready to put the pin washes on them. Okay, so before we move on to actually clear coating this and adding all the gunk wash or the panel line enhancements, what we're going to do is start painting some of the details. Now, the one big main thing about this kit is the fact that it has these little MFDs, so multifunction displays, and as well on our kind of upfront controller and HUD, this little circle right there, that's one of the RWRs. So all three of those are going to be painted in a dark green, and then covered over with a thin layer of smoke, and we're going to kind of tint it down until we get this nice kind of deep, glossy green type look to it. So for that we're going to use XF26 Deep Green. And I know what you're thinking, you're brush painting with Tamiya, are you fucked? No. So a lot of people think that it's almost impossible to brush paint with Tamiya acrylics because they're alcohol based and they evaporate so quickly. However, there is a solution to this, and there is a way to allow you to paint almost like a Vallejo or an AK type acrylic paint, and that's with this little guy here. So this is Tamiya's paint retarder. They're acrylic paint retarder, but this is for alcohol-based paints, and this also works on lacquer-based paints, I found. The key to this is the little tiny amount that you use, the better. So you don't want to completely, oversaturate it, because what happens is it doesn't end up actually drying. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to mix up our green here first. We get our Tamiya stir stick. And we're going to just kind of eyeball this per what we see. Let's see if we can get some more light over top. Looks like we're nicely mixed in there. I'm just trying to save as much as we can from our bottle. So we're just going to come in with a little eyedropper here. Take a little bit, because we're not doing a whole bunch. Give it 2 drops of that. Then we're going to come in with our X28 thinner. And we'll do the same thing. We'll take it 50-50 mix of that. Now the key to using the acrylic retarder is just the smallest amount. So you don't need a whole lot. You just want enough to help it brush down and then help slow the drying of the paint. So basically all we're going to do is we're going to take a toothpick and we're just going to dip it into a mixture. I'm just going to go ahead and mix that up. And for those of you wondering, these are tattoo ink cups. I found them a lot easier than trying to find the little small solo cups to use. These are just easy as hell, and you know, I get $100 for, you know, $1 essentially. So yeah, so we can go ahead and move on to actually painting these guys. Let's see if you can move in here. Some nice light in there. Okay. So I'm just using a very fine tester's brush, very fine point, and all we're going to do is just go very thin with our mixtures. Just start giving the and that'll basically just give us a nice kind of base to work on, and then the next layer should go on rather nice. This is a little thin, so what I might end up doing is adding a little bit more paint to the mixture. Basically, there we go. So coming with the next one as well. And we can just dot this one right into that little circle. There we go. So that's all done. And because these things stay liquid for so long because of the retarder, I'm just going to put that off to the side. And I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next color. So I just got some basic, you know, hardware store lacquer thinner here just to kind of really clean out the brush. And then usually after every kind of heavy brush painting session, I'll come in and I'll use some conditioner on the bristles just so that they don't completely dry out and start fraying, because that really sucks. And next, I guess we'll come in with some orange, some X6 for some of the circuit breakers on the right-hand console. Take a couple more of these cups out just in case, because I know I'll have a couple more colors that I want to do. A couple of droppers. So we'll go ahead and mix up our orange. And I'm just going to follow the same sort of ratio that I did with the last one, where I'm going to do a 50-50 paint to thinner, but I think with the orange, because it's such a thin color, I'm only going to do about 1 part thinner to 2 parts paint, if I can help it. Just so that I'm not completely... Actually, that might just be enough in there already. Yeah, there we go. Just the tiniest bit of thinner to make it flow a little bit easier. But we don't want it too thin, so as it doesn't flow into all the cracks, and then we have to wait for it to dry and then go ahead and, you know, paint over it again. Because it almost, if we do it too thin, then it starts to act like a wash. So again, we're just gonna dip into our retarder. Go ahead and mix that bad boy in there. And then I'm just testing on the side just to see how well the paint flows and if it stays in one spot. Because if it's too thin, then I've got to add a little bit more paint to it, or let it go off for a little bit. So just looking at the painting guide here, we've essentially got, we've already done this brass color here. We used Mr. Metal Colors brass. Just do that, and we might come in and polish up later. I might just leave the seat able to be removed. I think that would be pretty cool, but we'll see how well the pilot fits in at the same time. So basically, all the orange, we've got some, some orange over here. We're going to paint those black first, but we can go ahead and paint these orange here, a couple of these little panels down there, and that'll probably be the next colors going in with the black. But we're not going to use true black. We're going to use something like a NATO black, if I can find where I put my NATO black. Because it is in here, and I don't know where it is now. There we go. So, XR69 NATO black. We'll come and we'll do the gauges, and we'll also do the IP cover, some other, all the dials and that sort of thing. We'll do all of that in the NATO black, so that way it doesn't completely wreck how well the shadow works. So with this, sorry if I'm going to get my head in here. Just going to brace my hand. Basically, I'm just lifting a little bit of paint up onto the lip of the cup, and I'm just kind of feeding off of that to make my little drops. There we go. And then when the wash kind of goes into all those little crevices, that should make them stand out quite nice. But we'll go ahead and see if we can get a little bit more paint on there, just in the top buttons, because I'm trying to make it a little bit thinner so they look a little bit more pale like they do in real life. So they're not completely blotched out orange. And on the top, let's see. There's a couple of them in here that we're going to get. It's just amazing to think whoever originally did this spent all that time doing all these little switches knowing that eventually they'd be all covered up and no one would see them and give a damn. But it's nice to know, just from a personal kind of build point, you know, especially in the photo shoot stage. That's when you get to really capture all that detail and kind of bring it all into perspective, which I think is kind of like the highlight of most. Just this tiny one there, like that. I think that's it. There's nothing on the central IP. It's just here on the sides, and then nothing that goes on here. So that's okay. We can leave that. So we'll put our orange off to the side in case we need to come back later with it, and then rinse and repeat. Basically what I'm doing is I'm dipping and kind of brushing off in one direction, at the same time kind of rotating the brush as I go to kind of keep it at that fine point, but then also getting all the paint off. I don't kind of go back and forth, and I don't do little swirls with it because that ruins the ends of the bristles. And this way the paint will just be, as long as you have it soaked, it'll draw out all the rest of the paint as well. Alright, so coming with our NATO black here. And the interesting thing is that it says black, and then it's got a gray cap, but the paint, I don't know if you can tell, but it's almost got like this greenish tint to it, which is really, really nice. It kind of sets it off from like the navy blue, which is almost like a dark, it's like a dark sea blue, which is almost like a blue-black. It's really nice, you know. So it's almost like a blue-black. The NATO black is kind of like a green-black, and then your rubber tire, your rubber brown black is the it's kind of like the red-black. It's got a little bit of a red-brown kind of hue to it, or tone, however you want to say it, which is nice. It kind of helps when you've got everything that's black and say like an engine bay with our, you know, with our other builds. It helps to vary the color a bit, even so slightly, and that just helps the eye get drawn to it. So back out here, and we're basically rinsing and repeating the same process. We're going in with our teardrop here. Put that off to the side. Put the cap back on. And with our thinner here. Get a fresh toothpick so we're not mixing colors, even though it's black, but I don't want to make it too runny. And that's really nice. So what I'll do first is I'll come over and do the top of the IP panel here, which the whole top of it's really black. And for that, I'm going to get a little bit of a flatter brush, so that I'm not using one single small brush to do the entire job. favorite little mini flat brush here. Getting a little bit on. And this is gonna stress the whole point of, yes, you can hand brush Tamiya's paints. Just have to have the right tools for the job. Try and get the background moved out so you can at least see it. You can see I'm just going to constantly go over this point here, because if you were painting with just straight Tamiya paints, you know, after about the third or fourth kind of swipe, the paint would start to grab up, and because it was dry and you're putting new wet stuff on top of it. But this stuff, you know, even though that's now dry, I can still come back over it and brush it down, and I'm not getting any paint buildup. I'm not getting any you know, wet paint going over dry paint, pulling up the dry paint sort of thing that you normally get with you know, just straight from the bottle Tamiya. So a lot of it comes down to using, you know, that paint retarder. And at the same time, it also gives it somewhat of a self-leveling property. I find the paint goes down a little bit smoother. Even with, you know, a brush here, you can see there's next to no streak marks of the paint, and those all level out once this dries. You know, I'm putting these on fairly thick, and again, I'm just going to go rub over, you know, dried paint essentially, just to prove a point that with just straight out of the bottle you would never be able to do that with a Tamiya. But once you add that that retarder in there, it allows you to pretty much treat it like a water-based acrylic paint, like the AKs and the Vallejos and that sort of thing, which then can also work to your benefit, because if you know, you have one line of paints that you trust. In my case, I like working with a lot of, you know, the Tamiyas, because that's what I started off in the hobby using. You know, I started off using Tamiyas, and I continue to use them because I know how they work and I understand their properties. There's a group build coming up on the Scale Modelers Critique group, and in that one I'm going to be doing a 1 in 24th scale Focke-Wulf 190 D9 Dora, and I'm going to be experimenting with the Mr. Paint lacquer acrylics, which should be fun and interesting, because up until this point the paints I've really kind of used for RLM colors were the Tester's Model Master enamels, and that's how I got most of my RLM paints. So we're just coming in with our fine brush now, and we're going to go over the IP and just keep flashing back between my references. And what it's showing me on the instructions for a particular So what I'll do, that's basically just to prove the point there, is that yes, you can paint with Tamiya paints. It just takes the acrylic retarder, the paint retarder, to do it. And that's basically it. So what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and paint all the buttons, the dials, everything else. We'll get it into the spray booth and we'll get it clear coated, and then we'll come in with some panel line wash just to make everything pop. And once that's done, then we'll basically be ready to throw together the fuselage. So we're going to end this one here, and we'll come back in part 2 with just the general assembly of the fuselage and start getting things put together. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day. We'll see you in the next episode.